stories. So it's interesting to see how humor or the parody is present in these rereadings. I like to start with Jorge Luis Borges, but we do have others. We have Machado de Assis. We sometimes forget about him, or we read too fast and we don't notice how much the Bible is present in his work. I'm not even going to mention Moacir is clear because, Bible being revisited every minute. So it's a pleasure to be here sharing this journey with you guys, with such great professors. It's an honor for me. And in this particular event, I want to be provocative. I wanted to provoke with the reading of Machado de Assis and Jorge. Moacir is clear. And I'm trying to not to give any spoilers, but we are going to read a Portuguese writer who has a very interesting book, actually 2 volumes of a very interesting book. It is the erotic tales of the Old Testament. I'm going to analyze just one, and I hope that people get excited to read with us these authors, these wonderful authors. Wow. Erotic stories from the Old Testament is the book from Eliane Barroquero, right? And it's a very interesting book. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention the name of the author because it's not a spoiler, guys. Come on. Thank you very much, Professor Leslie. Now, there is another aspect on this rereading that is introduced by Professor Mark Rosenstein in his course, Existence or Resistance, Inflection Point or Turning Points in Jewish History. His book, Turning Points in Jewish History, is a book that spans a lot of Jewish history, a lot of turning points in Jewish history. Professor Mark Rosenstein is an emeritus director of the program in Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. He graduated in biochemistry in Harvard, and he has a master's degree and is also a doctor in Jewish history. He's also a rabbi from HUC, and he is an author of several books, several remarkable books. But this one that I mentioned, Turning Points in Jewish History, is the one that made us create this course of talking about these turning points in 6 classes. So my question to Professor Mark Rosenstein is, in this course, can you tell us a little bit about an example of a turning point that is going to be mentioned in the course, and how do you understand Judaism as a cumulative history? How does this rereading of history impact in our lives and our way of being Jewish today?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to participate in this course, and to see old friends again on the screen, if not in person. So I appreciate Mario making the contact. This book, the course arose out of the book that Kalita mentioned, Turning Points in Jewish History. You can see it's pretty thick. The assignment was to try and write a book from the Jewish Publication Society that would cover all of Jewish history. But that would be endless. I mean, it would be a multi-volume work, and then everybody would say it wasn't complete. And so we tried to approach Jewish history in a different way, and to say, well, but how could we look at it like we look at evolution? Evolution is also a biology, is a continuous process that changes every second. But we know that there are certain turning points that changed everything that came after that we can identify. For example, when plants developed photosynthesis, that was a moment that changed everything, and everything that came after was different from everything that came before. So the question is, could we identify points in the course of the Jewish people's life where an event could be identified and we could look at it and say, after that event, nothing was ever the same again. And so in writing the book, because of the confines of trying to write a textbook, I had to come up with 30, because they actually wanted a course that would have 30 lectures. And then Mario came along and said, how about 6? And so that's a very interesting challenge. How do you, winnow through 30 turning points? And no, 30 is too many. I want to identify the 6 points when Judaism changed irrevocably and in ways that it's worth our while to know about, because it contributes to who we are as Jews in a way that we can understand. And so that's the challenge. I think it was reasonably successful. You'll see when those of you who take the course will tell me afterwards if we succeeded or not. But let me give you an example. I mean, we could say, let's suppose that we played the game of having to reduce it to just one turning point. Is there one point before and after which nothing was the same? If you asked me that question, I would probably say Mount Sinai, the event at Mount Sinai. At the moment when the Jews had their collective revelation that there's a God up there who wants them to be a holy nation and was going to give them laws to do so, all the rest is commentary. We don't need any other turning points. That was the turning point. And we will talk about it, of course, in the course. But we could play this game and go on and say, well, what if there were 2 turning points? What would the second one be? And so forth and so on. And since we're trying not to give spoilers here, I'm not going to tell you the ones that we chose. But I hope that people will be challenged to think about their own Jewish development by looking at the turning points in the history of the Jewish people.
Muito interessante. A gente.
That's so very interesting. I think we could, yes, talk about before and after Sinai if we were going to put the timeline of Jewish tradition, right? So what I would like to say to the people at home that is watching this broadcast, we have 2 transmission channels. So if you are in the original channel, you can look there for the options for simultaneous interpretation. You can choose the channel in Portuguese for those who feel more comfortable listening in their own language. Now, the third rereading that we have is the one that brought Professor Dr. Daniel Strum. Daniel Strum is an economist, and he has a master's and a doctorate in Jewish history by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and he's a professor at the Faculty of History of the University of São Paulo. Professor Daniel Strum, as we have just talked to Mark about, talking about the turning points in Jewish history, Professor Daniel Strum has been approaching a huge turning point in Jewish history that has to do with the Jewish culture that was produced in Sepharad and how that was somehow broken at some point and became something else. So this is the rereading that he does of this particular aspect of Jewish history, of the Jewish people's history. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And just one thing. I would like to this was me working on my stereotype. I said to Professor Daniel, I talked about the Jewish survival. And he was like, no, this is what I want to deconstruct. But what is it to deconstruct that idea? And what idea do you want to build in your rereading? Your mic, Professor? I think I'm better when I'm not speaking, but I cannot really reveal that because that would be a spoiler. However, this is a topic that is floating around the discourse. There is a public debate about that. There's a lot of interest behind. There's a lot of mythology. There is a lot of folklore. And what I'm trying to do is bring order to that. I would like to talk about what was Jewish life in medieval Spain, still in the Muslim period. How does it come to an end with their expulsion? How does it happen in Portuguese? What was the Inquisition and what was the goal of the Inquisition? And finally, what was the crypto-Judaism phenomena? And discuss that. To what point these new Christians kept these Jewish practices in secret? What was the role of Inquisition in that? And the creation of new communities by Jewish people who were not born Jewish. They were born Christian. Sometimes they were the children of Christians. They are the grandchildren of Christians. So it's a long process, a process with a lot of turning points, but that also created new situations for the Jewish community, which is new communities formed by former Christians that were now Jewish. Thank you very much, Dani, for your overview of putting some order in history from your perspective. This is something that we expect to see in our course because it's from Cordoba to Recife. It's not a small distance to cover, right? Resistance, integration, and reinvention. Well, we have another course. It's a huge production. It's a course that was released by the Tikva Fund, and this course is now being broadcast in Portuguese based on a partnership with this institution. This institution has a very strong Jewish knowledge production in several interesting discussions that we have been trying to bring to you in Portuguese. Professor Dr. Yoram Hazoni is a philosopher, a political philosopher. He has written several bestsellers, and he works with the idea of nationalism based on the biblical roots and the rebirth route. When he says nationalism, he's saying about the national identity. He's talking about national identity. So this course has been produced, and what we're doing is developed a discussion, a local discussion, in the same vein that we did with the Micha Goodman course. So we had Rabbi Rubin conducting a very rich discussion in the second part of the class. And now we have this course, National Jewish Identity. So what is that? Ruben, could you talk to us a little bit about this, about how can we forge a national identity based on this perspective that Hazoni brings to the table? Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here with all of you. So many wonderful friends in our Zoom, some friends that we haven't seen in a long time, even students of mine I can see here. And it's very good to have all of you here with us. And Levi was my rabbi in Jerusalem, for example. Adad is the rabbi of my children in Jerusalem. So it's very good to be here amongst friends. The Jewish identity sometimes is misunderstood as a religious identity. And this is the first problem, the first conflict. We find a lot of Jewish people who say, I'm not religious. They say even I'm an atheist. I have no religion. Or I am agnostic. I don't know whether I believe it or not. I follow some of the traditions, and sometimes it's just a family thing, you know? So if the identity is religion, we have a problem. Now, the Jewish religion says that the Jewish identity is not religion. I will repeat that because it's very complex. The religion, the Jewish religion itself states that the Jewish identity is not a religious identity. Allah doesn't say anywhere that to be Jewish, you need to believe X, Y, or Z, or eat in a certain way, or pray in a certain way, and follow the mitzvah. It's not written anywhere. The religious Jewish law states that the Jewish identity is a national identity. And Jewish is the person who was born in a Jewish family or a person that has decided to adopt the Jewish culture without adopting the historical the ancestors. They would adopt the Jewish ancestors as their own. What Hazoni will try to show and bring here to the debate is how this identity is a national identity all throughout our history. How this identity comes to be as the identity of a people, of a group. It develops values and beliefs and rituals, yes, but before anything else, it's a large community, a large family, a large group. And in this group, we have several ideas, several values, several beliefs, and several unbeliefs, but the group remains. And for us, it will be very interesting to think what we win or in what we lose when we define our identity as a national identity. Thank you, Ruben. Ruben, he's here exercising several functions as usual as director or the dean of the Jewish Academy. He takes on a role from the beginning, from the selection of what courses are we going to give, curating the course, but he is also a professor in the fifth course that we are going to present today, that are the 5 pillars of renovation for the main celebrations. But he's not alone. He's here with a very strong team with the Rabbi Levi Kelman and Oded Mazur, and from Kol Shama. And Rabbi Levi Kelman is an emeritus rabbi in the Colonia Shamak, and he actually founded in the 80s, and it is the main expression of the plurality of Judaism in the city of Jerusalem. He defends human rights, and he is the president of Rabbis for Human Rights. This is an aspect that all the 3 professors have in common. All of them are very militant in the cause of human rights. Oded Mazor is a master in Jewish philosophy, and he has co-edited several books of tefillah, such as Shalosh Regalim, Asint Nashabalev, and he has also participated in the new Israeli Sidur Committee. Nowadays, he is the rabbi at Kol Neshama, that Levi Kelman is the emeritus rabbi. So, Rabbi Ruben, you already know, right? But just to tell people who may not know, he is an educator, has a master's degree in Jewish philosophy and science, and also a doctorate in philosophy by USP. He's also the dean of the Jewish Academy, and he works with human rights when we can highlight some initiatives against racism and in favor of the homeless population. Well, the course, 5 pillars of renovation for celebrations. This comes at a very timely moment because we are in this process of Teshuvah that goes from Elul to Yom Kippur. And in this journey, this rereading of the liturgy seems very important in order to promote a renewal of our community, of our mind, our spirit, the philosophy of Teshuvah in itself. So, Ruben, please take over with your colleagues now. I'll pass the floor to you about this course, and maybe we can have some questions from the members of the audience. Okay, my pleasure. So I will start explaining why I chose amongst all my rabbis, my colleagues, rabbi all around the world in Brazil and in Israel, in Jerusalem, why these two? Why these two friends? Why have I chosen Levi and Oded? And the answer is as follows. Because this time I wanted to show all our audience, I wanted to bring them new insights from liturgy of the great celebrations. Because I believe there's where we can find many of the losses that will help us to really carry out a rereading of personal, social, community, for the whole humanity. That is what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are all about. Of course, on my part, I will bring the proposal of the Teshuvah from Maimonides before the Bible and the Talmud. The concept of Teshuvah is very old. People think sometimes that Teshuvah is becoming ultra-Orthodox, but they think it is one of the greatest problems of Jewish identity. But this word is very old. There was no orthodoxy at first, right? And people talk to God through teshuvah. But in Talmud, teshuvah becomes a personal process, something close to spirituality and psychology. And in the Middle Ages, Maimonides is the one that stipulates some rules and recommendations that are later taken over by Soloveitchio and other philosophers that dedicated themselves for several years to select amongst the Teshuvah messages what is used for the 21st century. So this is what I'm going to do, how the concept evolved, how this redesign happened, how are we free and responsible for who we are every day. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur offer us the opportunity to shake who we are today so that tomorrow we can be better. But the liturgy, what we pray in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Vino Malkeinu, the Shofar song. There's a lot more than it seems. Sometimes we go in and out of the synagogue the same. We come out the same as we went in because we don't always know how to read what's in between the line in these ancestral texts. In my humble opinion, well, not humble opinion, it's a very proud opinion. Levi and Oded are two of the most interesting readers of the Tefillah. They are people that I can hand my community to. I can hand them my audience so that my audience can hear from them directly the ancestral prayers. And that's why I invited Levi and Oded to share with us some of the many insights that they have. Levi, as I said, was my rabbi, and Oded, who is today the rabbi of the new generations of my family. So let's hear them. Levi, Oded, tell us a little bit about what we are going to discuss in our course. Each one of you are going to have two classes, right? Wonderful classes to share with us your insights about the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur prayers. Tell us what's happening.
So, hello everybody, shalom. I wanted to use the two classes to do two very different things. On the first one, I want to look at the big picture of the liturgy, how it starts already in Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, and all the way through to the end of Yom Kippur, how there's some prayers that we say throughout that period, and some prayers that are just for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and some prayers that are just said from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. And I think all of those different prayers are there to help us go through a deep spiritual and psychological experience. And I wanted to look at all the big picture of what the rabbis were trying to do when they structured the high holiday service, because a great deal of thought went into crafting, making the liturgy of the high holidays. So in my first class, I want to kind of look at the big picture of what the rabbis are trying to do. In the second class, I want to take one prayer that I think exemplifies the whole idea of liturgy and tshuva, and I'm already going to tell you the punchline, the big reveal. The prayer
No
that
spoiler.
the prayer I want to look at is the prayer that occurs the most in the High Holiday Prayer Book, and that is the 13 attributes of God. And I want us to study those words very carefully and look at them in the biblical context and see what were the rabbis trying to do. They could have picked any prayer, any words from the Bible to guide us through the high holidays, but they picked these particular 13 words. So I want to look at that very carefully and see how it guides us in the process of tshuva. That's my plan.
Thank you. Muito obrigado, Levi.
De nada.
Thank you, Levi. It's going to be
Shalom,
wonderful,
everyone.
I'm sure.
E nos
Shalom,
prepara para os
everyone.
cursos.
I'm talking outside in Jerusalem because there are many demonstrations going on here, and as part of preparation for the high holidays, it's also participating in the demonstrations here, part of our tshuva in Israel. I would like to focus in my classes on the Torah readings and the haftarot, the readings from the prophets during the high holidays. What are we reading from the Torah and from the prophets when we gather in the synagogue for these major events that start our year? What did the creators of our tradition decide that we will read from the Torah? And what does that tell us about?
Oh, microphone. Wait, wait.
Another meaning of it, also to look at the readings in the weeks before the high holidays arrive. What do we read in the Shabbatot that come before Rosh Hashanah? Why maybe did our sages decide, or maybe actually later on in the times of the Babylonian teachers, that we will conclude reading the Torah on Simchat Torah? So what does that put before us as we approach the high holidays in the Torah readings? And in the Haftarot, what paragraphs from the prophets did our teachers from ancient times decide that we will read? Some of them are rather sarcastic, but we will read more deep into it when we are meeting in our sessions. So the Torah readings and the prophets of the high holidays.
Okay. It sounds, se ouve maravilhoso.
Parece muito, it sounds very good, right? These are aspects that usually most people don't really see. The 13 words, for example, the 13 attributes of God, they're mentioned so much that people they just like, I understood that, I understood. Let's think about something else. They take it for granted. So I think Levi's contribution will be a turning point in our personality, in our experience of the high holidays. And Odette, you were very surgical in your observation. That's a part that it gets lost in the liturgy, which is the moment that people are going through the synagogue, checking whether they're going to go up or not, and who goes up or down in the Torah. And this mostly in Hebrew, so it's even harder sometimes. I hope these we will bring some light to these topics. Kelita, the microphone is yours.
Sim, o que o Rabino Oded
What Rabbi Oded mentioned now about what he's been experiencing right now, these demonstrations in Israel, if I would like to ask whether Mark's book that was published in 2018, do you think we will need 31 turning points? Because I think we are living through one of these moments, right, in the history of our people. We do have with Professor Leslie a selection of literary material that's very impressive. I have not studied Machado de Assis, for example, since I was trying to get into university. So reading it again now as with this purpose of studying, bringing this perspective of looking for Jewish influences, it's going to be a great pleasure. Daniel Strum, it's going to bring us to the ships that came from Portugal. We went to Jerusalem the other day with the other course, right? Now he's going to bring us from Cordoba to Recife. So I think I don't know how do I say that. I want to say strap your seatbelts, but I don't know how we say that in the maritime context. Do we have some kind of seatbelts on a boat? I don't know. Oh, I'm not sure. Well, we do have some questions here. We have a question from João Luiz Falkenstein. He asks to Professor Leslie. Professor Leslie, what would be the connection between the Brazilian literature writers and the Bible, if not through the subjective, unconscious memories from their ancestors? Can I answer? Oh, good. Well, it's not really subconscious. When Machado de Assis takes, for example, in the Esaú Jacó is a book written by Machado de Assis. He takes these two brothers that are in the dispute with one another. First, for the affection of a woman, but later by the assets of the family. These they are one is trying to defend the republic, the other is defending the monarchy. So what we see there, it's not something innocent or subconscious. This is the text of the Tanakh. This is the text of the Torah. I can say the same thing about Moacir Clear because he wrote a book called The Woman Who Wrote the Bible. So this access to the Bible canon, it's not innocent, it's not naive, you know. We have several writers who are part of the Jewish context of Moacir Clear was Jewish. And we have Machado de Assis. Machado de Assis was not Jewish, but he sees in the Hebrew Bible this wealth of issues that he can treat in his short stories, his romance. So I think this rereading will be a surprise, right? We will lift the veil of this Jewish tradition in Machado de Assis. Thank you, Professor Leslie. Dani, we have a question about the expulsion from Spain. And here we have a reality that is the new Christians or the Reformed Jews, but we also have another reality that is not really part of this trip that came to Recife. So there was a dispersion that took two different directions. Are you going to talk about that in the course somehow? And these different ways of that happened post the turning point. Well, the idea is exactly to discuss these different paths and different choices and how difficult those choices actually were. Of course, not everyone became new Christians. Some of them became large communities, important communities, especially in the Ottoman Empire, in Morocco, and a little bit in Italy as well. What people sometimes get confused is that the Northern European communities, like such as Amsterdam and some in Italy and France as well, it seems like this was created automatically with the expulsion because it's a tidy discourse, right? The Jewish left from Lisbon, they went to X place and became Y. It took generations for people to come, and they were already living as Christians. So this creates a new Jewish identity because they were acculturated. They have a very intense life in the Iberic Peninsula. They had a connection with this European world, and it will be hard for them to reintegrate in the Jewish identity. And this is unforeseen until then in Jewish history.
Muito interessante. Rubem, você pode também fazer
That's very interesting.
papel para poder
Ruben, you can take your questions as well. I feel that you seem so eager to ask something to somebody. Well, yeah, yes, I do. Was going to ask Marco to tell us another turning point, if he could, just like rushing it a little bit. It's going to be a spoiler, right? I don't know. I understand that the main idea of this course, and I think that is important to tell to the audience, is not just the choice of the content, because yes, it's new content, creative, innovative content. There are several authors that are working with this new perspective. But here, what we have is, in addition to the choice of the topics, which are new, the professors here, they have worked on these topics, and therefore it's a meeting of two innovative aspects. Mark, for example, he's going to show that in his reading of reading, these are the turning points, and he has to explain why these ones and not others. What came before, what came later, what happened in this turning point. And he's bringing specifically some of the attitudes that by any reason he chose, and he will have to explain why, right? Why are they representative of how to face these challenges with our identity in different contexts? Leslie is going to bring her analysis of the novelty that these all authors bring, both to the reading of the Bible and the influence of the author. We wanted the academy wants to bring Judaism to an innovative current light, but based on a strong foundation of historical realities, and tries to connect with the reality of the people participating. None of these courses is a course that you're going to say like, oh, nice, I learned something new. You're going to say that, but you're not going to just say that. You are going to say how this influenced my life, my history, my contact with the Tanakh, and my teshuvah itself. So I would like to ask Mark, can you reveal us any other turning point? I imagine that maybe not, but I think most people can imagine why Mount Sinai was chosen, but we are going to listen to that during the course. But how do you, if you could say, tell us, how do you see that?
Well, I'll say,
You don't have to say a lot, okay?
don't worry, I won't say a lot. I think rather than name a specific turning point, I'll say that when we think about turning points, they fall in a few different categories. One is a turning point where we were impinged upon by some outside force, like we were expelled from Spain, or we were driven out of Ashkenaz towards Poland because of the Crusades, or we left Russia and migrated by the millions to the Americas. In other words, those are events where we were subject to historical forces and we had to respond to them. But there's another kind of turning, and each of those are obviously turning points. I mean, you can see how everything changed for thousands of Jews, and they had to rethink their religious faith as well as their practice. But there are also turning points that come internally, where the religion and the identity develops in response to cultural trends or to belief systems, or to powerful personalities within the Jewish people who made changes, which again echoed down through the history. So, for example, Hasidism, the rise of Hasidism. There's an example for you that we'll talk about in the course in 18th century Poland. A movement which at the time was considered a minor rebellion, and the establishment tried to put it down. And today it dominates Orthodox Judaism in much of the world. And so I think we have to say that, you know, the Baal Shem Tov and the rise of Hasidism was a turning point, even though we can't necessarily identify it as being the product of a historical event like the expulsion from Spain or something else. It was an internal turning point that developed out of the internal dynamic of the Jewish people's development. So those are the kinds of examples of things we'll talk about. And there, I hope that answers your question.
Ok. Eu não sei como estão as coisas em Jerusalém.
Well, I don't know how things are in Jerusalem right now. I know that the time is a bit late and the situation is delicate. So I can say, I don't know if people would dare to ask more questions, but I would like to ask, what's the main of the teshuvah that you would bring? I think it's interesting to see how in different times, different authors, different protagonists and philosophies and psychologists and rabbis from the Torah to our days, they have said or they have proposed pathways, ways of researching who we are when we speak and when we keep our silence, because sometimes doing something, it's not exactly the same. 10 people could be in the same synagogue praying the same prayer, but what's happening inside them is something else. Not everyone is doing the teshuvah. Teshuvah from where to where? Does Judaism have anything to say about that? Has that changed? Because Maimonides is in the Middle Ages, he said something different, and the Soloveitchik in the United States said something else. And what about Herman Cohen? In another moment, he said something else. So who is correct? What will bring us the true experience in our days? Oded, can you speak a little bit more? Oded? Oded, are you there? Can you?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Talvez você consegue nos dizer.
Oded, could you tell us just choose one idea that you see present in the test of Torah or Tara for the high holidays or from the previous Shabbatot and other celebrations that you believe could be could represent or a trigger for people who are listening to us now?
So I think the most, how would I say it? The most ironic reading during the high holidays is what our tradition gives us to read the more to fast for the first 10 or 12 hours is not a big deal, right? Most of us after dinner go to sleep and don't eat much during the night and the early morning. But around 10, 11 o'clock,
Bom, eu acho que
É,
nesse
verdade.
calor que tá os
Well,
movimentos.
I think the demonstration. Yeah, I think this was the best sales thing that he left us waiting. He left us on a cliffhanger. We prepared on Yom Kippur for, and then we have this. We now you have to watch the course to see what he says next. Yes, guys, the only way out here is enrolling. Well, we invited people to come here to meet our professors, and as you said, Ruben, you presented the content of the course of Yoram Hazoni, but it would be good to hear a little bit of Professor Hazani himself, right? Because after all these professors that are here with us, they are specialists in their area, no doubt about that, but they are also people with a very strong charisma. And when we see them, how they interact and how they speak, we can imagine what it's going to feel like in the classroom when we are with them, interacting with them. So I would like to ask Nathan to share with us 2 minutes of the presentation of Professor Yoram Razoni's course. Essa não é uma época como qualquer outra. É alguma coisa está acontecendo, alguma coisa está despertando. Eu não acho que haja nada mais relevante para o momento atual do que essa luta entre o nacionalismo e o imperialismo. O mundo seria muito melhor se as nações fossem livres. Isso é a tradição da política israelense. A gente você precisa ser parte da sua nação e fazer parte do cumprimento da missão da sua nação. Esse é o nacionalismo judaico. Nós temos recursos para pensar sobre o nacionalismo, para pensar, para avaliá-lo, para pensar, isso é algo bom para mim? Ou será que isso é algo ruim? Nós faremos um tour que começa com o livro de Gênesis e vai pelo exílio, a ascensão do nacionalismo cristão e a ideia e a realidade de um Estado judeu independente no nosso tempo. É uma história e tanto. Jewish Academy, the best of 5,000 years of culture. Well, guys, you have met Professor Yoram Hazoni, and we would really like to hear from him. So we have just a few minutes, right, for this transmission. So I would like to ask Mario Flack, the idealist behind the Academia Judaica and the driving force behind this movement. Mark, what are your expectations for this cycle now? And after you speak, I ask for each one of our professors to say one last sentence. What's your expectation for this course? We talked about our expectations, right? Now we want to know what are your expectations, and with that, we will close the session. Thank you, Kelita. I would just like to discuss the idea behind of the creation of the Jewish Academy. The founders of the Academy believe that Jewish knowledge, it's a treasure, it's a wealth of knowledge, but that has been hidden. It's unknown to a large part of the Jewish community itself. And we understand that this wealth of knowledge needs to be open. And the role of the Jewish Academy is to provoke curiosity, so that the academy can become the key to open this chest of knowledge, one connected to the whole history of Israel, Zionism. It's a fantastic story as an example, as a reality that we lived through. And the second session of would be all the classic books, the Jewish philosophy, something that has brought knowledge, examples, and inspiration for the whole of humanity. And the third session is about people, about the nation that came up and down and have gone through so much in its history, and this history must be known. So the role of the academy is the being the key to unlock that wealth of knowledge, allowing each one of you to look for what you're curious about and learn deeper about the Jewish knowledge. And this new section of courses, as we've seen so far, has some examples of each one of these three sessions of the Jewish knowledge. I invite you all to come and participate. Give it a chance. I know that this curiosity will come to you and you will dive into Jewish knowledge increasingly more every day, finding new parts of this wonderful treasure. Thank you, Kelita. Thank you, Mario. I will use your metaphor. What we're doing today is just having a tiny little peek, right, into what this wealth of knowledge will be. And those who want to hold the key and open this treasure, please enroll in our courses that will start now from August 1st onwards. So, to come to a close, I would like to ask all the professors to open your mics, and give us our last remarks, inviting our colleagues here, telling us what's your expectation. Can I go first? Sure, sure. Well, my expectation is that people are interested in reading and rereading. I love literature, but literature here is talking to other areas of knowledge, such as history, psychoanalysis, and philosophy. So I hope that everyone is as excited as I am with the reading and rereading of Machado de Assis, Clear, Borges, and Diana Barroqueira. I'm waiting for you all there. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. I have expectations in Leslie's course. I have an expectation, Leslie. I expect people to be excited to read these authors, but also reread the Bible based on that, because I'm a rabbi and we are at the Jewish Academy. In the light of the Bible, I hope that they find new insights in these authors that were able to, like Thomas, in several places we have that, right? Thomas Mann, and they were able to rewrite and enhance. Yes, I think there are two movements that are happening here simultaneously. After reading Cain and Abel from Jorge Luis Borges, our outlook to the text in the Tanakh, it does not remain the same. It just doesn't. So this is what we are proposing. We move forward, but looking to the original text of the Torah and the Tanakh. Marco, Danielle, do you want to say? Tell us a few last words here. Well, I intend to make available a lot of texts for those who want to read further. And I expect to break down a few myths and bring a little bit of order, but most of all, raise questions and encourage you to continue watching about this and other topics connected to it.
And
Excellent.
I'll add that going back to my biological metaphor, just like each of us carries a little bit of the DNA of all of our ancestors all the way back to bugs. Each Jew carries a little bit of everything, of every turning point in Jewish history that's accumulated and creates the Jewish identity that we carry. And so in studying those turning points, we're studying ourselves and getting an understanding of what our Jewish identity really means and what its content is and what the options are that we can choose and planning our future turning points as Jews. So.
Super. Obrigado, Mark e Daniel.
That's great. Thank you, Marky, Danielle, and Lizzie. This is what the Jewish Academy aims at. We want to bring subjects that are not as well known, but that are very relevant, even more than people know, as Mario said. We want to shake people. We want to enrich people. We want to enrich in their questions that they ask themselves and the multiple identities that we have and the Jewish identity in particular. This is a work that we have to carry out ongoingly, but especially in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We need to live in constant teshuvah. What does that mean? Constant teshuvah means recognizing who we are and redesigning to who we want to be. For all of that, the Jewish Academy with personalities such as Mark, Danielle, Lizzie, Levi, and Odette, maybe even myself, let's hope we will be able to help you. That was so great, guys. Thank you all so much. Thank you for everyone who is here with us, amongst the professors and our team from the Jewish Academy as well, that has been supporting, working today so that we could broadcast this event. And thank for our interpreter who has helped and facilitated the communication. And we'll do it again throughout the courses, because the courses are with some professors from different countries, and they will have simultaneous translation and the subtitles in Portuguese. Therefore, you can come and you can feel comfortable to participate in our course fully, because communication will be facilitated in different ways through the technological tools and through the people that are here participating with us. And we have a small gift for those who are participating this transmission today. Who wants to enroll? If you want to use the coupon 40 event, all of that in caps, 40 event, you can enroll today with a 40% discount. We thank you all very much for being here with us through the transmission, through the broadcasting, and we will look forward to seeing you in the classroom.